What's good, everyone, and welcome back to another reaction video. Today we're reacting to Fact. Michael Afton is Mike Schmidt. Ultimate Breakdown. This was suggested by... hold on. I wrote the name down. GMKA. So, Jimka? Jimk? I guess that would be it. Anyway, yeah, so this is it. Judging by the title, this is like trying to be fully. This is a theory that's just trying to prove that Michael Afton is Mike Schmidt. So, yeah, let's see what this is all about. Anyway, I hope you'll enjoy this video. Like, comment, subscribe. Hit the notification button to be notified immediately when the video comes out. If there's any videos you'd like to recommend that I should react to, put it down in the comment section below, and I'll react to it as soon as possible. The link to this video is down in the description below, so be sure to give this sandwich man some love and support for the video that they made. Now, with this all said, let's get started, shall we? Now, I think I said this probably before. Maybe, I don't know, but I just can't fully believe Mike Schmidt and Michael Afton are the same person, especially with the fact that with every piece of evidence, new details and all this and all that, it's just, with everything happening, from the FNAF 2 movie, The Secrets of the Mimic, and various other stuff, I just can't say I believe that Michael Afton is Mike Schmidt. It's just hard for me to fully believe that. So yeah, anyway, let's get straight into this video. I gave you my opinions on the matter itself. I just can't find myself to believe it. So yeah, honestly, let's see where this goes. Anyway, yeah, let's just see.
In recent months, a legacy debate from back in the day has revived due to recent information we've been given from the second Five Nights at Freddy's movie. And while I think some things that the movie has brought up are totally reasonable to bring back into the discussion hot seat, one of these is something I think is abundantly clear, and reviving it in the community is frankly beating a dead horse that has been killed many times. And that is Michael Afton the same character as the player of FNAF 1, Mike Schmidt? Well, the answer to that is an astounding yes, and this is what I plan on dissecting for you all today.
Again, I'm just here to listen. So go ahead. Show me the proof. I'm also not gonna talk that much because this video is 8 minutes long, and I rather not listen to a very long video.
Hello, my fellow FNAF fans. Yes, I know. This video has been done many times over the history of the Five Nights at Freddy's series, which is why I have referred to it as a horse that has been beaten to death many times. But even though this has been covered so much in the FNAF community over the years, it still baffles me that this is a debate that is still somehow gaining traction within the debate circles of the Five Nights at Freddy's lore. However, considering that I want to be as charitable as I possibly can to the Five Nights at Freddy's community amidst its disagreements, I want to do as best of a breakdown on this topic as I possibly can, strongly defending the position that Michael Afton is 100% the same character as Mike Schmidt. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and let's get right into it. So before we start diving into the controversial stuff, we first need to establish what the community pretty much unanimously agrees are the 4 non-negotiable aspects to Michael Afton's character that are not up for debate and have been decisively decided. Whether by being inherently proven by information explicitly given or further evidence that has come out over the years, those 4 are: number 1, Michael Afton is the Foxy Bro. Number 2, Michael Afton is the player of FNAF Sister Location and FNAF 6. Yep. Number 3, Michael Afton is the writer of the logbook. And number 4, Michael Afton has, to some degree, experienced the nightmares. Most of these are pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah. That's the thing I think everyone can agree with when it comes down to Michael Afton. We can say that he definitely experienced the nightmares. Through what means? Well, with everyone agreeing and disagreeing, it's diverse. But I think we can all agree as a community that he definitely experienced those nightmares, because in his logbook, he did admit to he did drew nightmare Fredbear. So
I'll explain briefly why these are all definitive and are pretty much undeniable. Starting with Michael being the Foxy Bro, hilariously, this is actually the most controversial one, but at this point, it is almost unanimously agreed upon. Back in 2018, MatPat himself made a video called FNAF The Theory That Changed Everything, FNAF 6 Ultimate Custom Night. In this video, MatPat made a claim that Michael Afton was the bite victim because of the fact that Michael himself experienced the nightmares in the logbook, so therefore he was the bite victim himself. While this video was popular as all game theory videos were, it was endlessly mocked by many FNAF theorists, some calling it the worst FNAF theory that MatPat himself has ever made. I definitely wouldn't go that far, but the reason it was so heavily criticized was because the video itself had to claim the protagonist for the rest of the series was a robot, which really didn't make much sense considering this is not a robot. But regardless, multiple pieces of information came out over the years that would pretty much completely debunk this idea entirely. The original piece of information to almost entirely debunk it was the Ultimate Guide in 2021, where it outright stated in fan theories that Michael Afton was the older brother. Of course, this didn't really settle anything, considering the Ultimate Guide was revealed to be radically unreliable, and this was in the context of fan theories. However, about a week later, Five Nights at Freddy's Security Breach came out, and yeah, that's pretty hard to refute. In what is known as the Stafton table, you have a table featuring the entire Afton family, featuring Elizabeth as the baby staffbot, the one missing his head as the bite victim staffbot, and one in a guard outfit featuring the older brother, aka what we have explicitly seen in the logbook. Therefore, Michael Afton is the older brother, and therefore, Mike Bro. Second, Michael is the player of Sister Location and Pizzeria Simulator. We got confirmation of this in the final cutscene of the game, as Michael explicitly says,
"Father, it's me, Michael. I did it. I found it. It was right where you said it would be."
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then goes on to say,
"I'm going to come find you."
And find him he does in the 6th game. As the next game that comes out, we see Michael as a manager fulfilling his duties under paragraph 4 to lure everybody in and kill them. We know for certain that this is Mike due to Molten Freddy's voice line, "Together again," as proof that Michael is the player. The third non-negotiable is that Michael wrote the logbook. Since we have confirmation of him being the player of Sister Location, the writer of the logbook draws baskets of cash and baskets of exotic butters, casual bongos, and says he enjoys the immortal and the restless. And last but not least, we know he has experienced the nightmares to some degree due to him drawing a picture of Nightmare Fredbear within the book. To this extent, most people conclude he is the player of FNAF 4, including myself, which I'll get into later. So with this laid out, this is the groundwork for what we can build from ground up on other certain matters relating to Michael's character. The information here has led many theorists to conclude that Michael is involved in all 6 games and is the player of all 6 games, but even though there is a lot of overlap, as the video is titled, it's not centered on the question of whether Michael is the player of all 6 games, but whether he is specifically the player of FNAF 1, Mike Schmidt. To answer the question of whether Michael Afton is Mike Schmidt specifically, it really can be boiled down to one simple question. Can you infer from the game's exclusive information alone that Michael Afton worked at the Freddy Fazbear's Pizza location in FNAF 1? And the answer to this question, without any shadow of a doubt, is a definitive yes. While there is no such thing in the game that straight up proves this, there are a ton of pieces of evidence here and there that extremely heavily imply it. I'm going to go over first some of the weaker pieces of evidence that are still worth noting, precisely because it's at least a good starting point. In the FNAF 6 soundtrack, you have multiple names of songs that have a lot to do with the event at hand, like Nowhere to Run being the theme for Henry's monologue, Legal Woes for when you're filing for lawsuits, etc. But there's a couple that directly relate to Michael himself, like No Time for Popcorn, as in no time to sit back and relax, or The Runaway, potentially being evidence for Michael's role in Midnight Motorist. This seemingly implies that the music itself may have clues to important information, but one of these stands out above the rest in potential evidence connecting Michael to FNAF 1, the song Minor Corrosion to the Bizet, which is that it's literally a slowed down version of the Toreador March. The Toreador March also has a leitmotif that plays in the song.
I'm praying to everything above that there's no thing that just screams copyright here. But
Demolition Inevitable.
Overestimate.
Now this is not decisive by any means, considering the Toreador March has been played elsewhere that is no relation to Michael at all, like the beginning of the FNAF 2 movie, but it's still worth noting. In Sister Location, there are multiple parallels in the private room to the FNAF 1 layout, but that's not really that important. What is important is this specific shot of Ennard in the supply closet corner, which is a pretty interesting callback. Now, is this just Jeremy's influence over Ennard? Definitely most likely, but just like the theme in FNAF 6, it's definitely worth pointing out as a parallel to who the guard actually is. There's also the case in FNAF 4, where the layout matches FNAF 1 pretty clearly. Bonnie on the left, Chica on the right, Foxy hiding and checking him to keep him at bay, and Freddy behind you, which, yes, happens in the first game. In the Game Over screen of FNAF 1, what you'll notice is that the eyes poking out of Freddy is a person with blue eyes. In the Sister Location cutscene, we explicitly see Michael who has blue eyes before he starts visibly decaying. This is incredibly important, since under Tom's 2 Mike model, which I will be discussing extensively later, this means you would have two Michaels with blue eyes literally working back to back. I don't know about you, but that sounds pretty damn unlikely. Now before I get into the strongest piece of evidence, I first want to go on a detour and give some indirect evidence by connecting the FNAF 3 guard to the players of FNAF 1 and 6. The FNAF 3 guard directly experiences the phantom animatronics from both the locations of FNAF 1 and 2, implying that he has visited both. Now that alone is pretty damning evidence that the player of FNAF 3 has been to the first two locations, but there's something that very explicitly connects it to Michael's goal at the end of Sister Location. In that cutscene, he makes it clear.
There is only one thing left for me to do now. I'm going to come find you.
And when we get to FNAF 3, Phone Dude says this.
Hey, glad you came back for another night. I promise it'll be a lot more interesting this time. We found some great new relics over the weekend, and we're out tracking down a new lead right now.
This means that the guard who was working at FNAF 3 initially checked it out, left, and then came back. Now seriously, why is this line here? Well, this line is actually super crucial, because if the guard is a complete rando looking for a paycheck, there is no reason for this rando to get a job, leave, and then come back. However, if this is framed within Michael's declared goals to find his father, then it absolutely makes sense. When Michael hears about the horror attraction that featured, quote, actual relics from decades-old pizzeria, he's probably super curious to check it out in case it leads to his father. When he finds out that it has no interesting leads to his father, he ends up leaving, but once Phone Dude declares that he found great new relics and is tracking down a new lead, he comes back. And if Michael is the FNAF 3 guard, then it makes complete sense as to not only why the building would randomly burn down due to, quote, faulty wiring, but also that he is experiencing the FNAF 1 and 2 animatronics, because as I will go over later when we get to Ticket to Fun, Mike Schmidt himself has seen the FNAF 2 animatronics. Now before we get into the logbook, I'm going to give a super interesting argument that I don't often see brought up, and it has to do with Michael's language at the end of Sister Location.
They didn't recognize me at first, but then They thought I was you.
This is the antecedent to what he says just prior.
They were all there.
Part of this is something we see explicitly played out in the game.
I don't recognize you. You are new.
And then she later says,
There is nowhere to go when we look like this.
this allows us to come to some conclusions based on the linguistics of the word recognize Michael speaks of. While it's true that the word recognize has multiple definitions, like to acknowledge acquaintance with or to take notice of someone in a definitive way, by Michael stating that they didn't recognize at first and later understood it to be William instead, as in falsely identifying who he was, means that the recognition is based on prior familiarity. This is precisely because Michael is stating that they are attempting to recognize him as someone, falsely coming to the conclusion that he is William. Meaning that, pragmatically, Michael is heavily implying that recognize means that they had already met him before and are trying to correctly identify him. Based on what we know in the 2016 FNAF World and ScottGames.com source code, Elizabeth Afton is directly arguing with the spirits inside of Ennard, precisely because pure AI alone would have no incentive to try and boot Elizabeth out of Ennard, and because we're confirmed that the Funtime animatronics have Remnant inside of it by the Molten Freddy blueprint. Elizabeth also references Circus Baby in third person in the ending.
Funtime Foxy has already been here today. Funtime Freddy has already been here today. Ballora has already been here today. Circus Baby has already been here today.
Meaning Elizabeth herself is speaking on behalf of all of the missing kids and not just the AI of the animatronics, since the entire collective of the kids' spirits are who she's arguing with in Scott Games. This allows us to come to 4 major conclusions. Number 1, when Michael says they, he is not referring exclusively to the Funtime animatronics. Number 2, the word recognize strongly implies someone that they were familiar with prior to Michael's appearance in Sister Location. Number 3, when Elizabeth says we, whoever she is referring to, the missing kids are included. And number 4, the we that Elizabeth is referring to is who Michael is saying recognize him as his father. By these 4 things, there is only one logical conclusion that we can draw. The missing children knew what Michael Afton looked like prior to the events of Sister Location, and there are only 2 places that could possibly be, which is the FNAF 1 or 2 location, or both. And if you believe Michael worked at the FNAF 2 location, then you know it is extremely likely he also worked at the FNAF 1 location, since it makes very little sense why Michael would be involved in the second location and not the first, since the evidence of his involvement in FNAF 2 is significantly weaker than his involvement in the first. But as you know, we don't need to rely purely on gameline information alone to get us to the conclusion that Michael himself worked at FNAF 1, because we have what is one of the most important and lore-heavy pieces of information to straight up confirm this as a definitive fact: the survival logbook. Prior to the information given in the survival logbook, what we were given in the games was an inference, but not definitively proven, which is probably what most of you guys were thinking at this point in the video. Yes, even though you could gather enough information from the games that Michael was involved with more games than just 2 of them, technically it was still just in the realm of theory, even though the evidence itself pointed towards one way over the other. But when the logbook itself was released on December 26th of 2017, everything changed. As explained earlier, we are certain that Michael Afton was the writer of this thing. But just to recap, we know this due to Michael's drawings of Cash and Exotic Butters, Casual Bongos, and mentioning that he likes watching Immortal and the Restless. However, what we also were confirmed in this book was what was written by Mike on page 5 that gives us the perfect silver bullet we need. Lists 10 reasons why applying to Freddy Fazbear's Pizza seemed like a good idea at the time, and Michael writes, employees get free pizza. And on top of this, we can garner which Freddy Fazbear's Pizza Michael worked at by his drawing on page 62, which features a logo of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza with the classic Freddy Fazbear. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a winner. Michael Afton worked at the FNAF 1 location. But now...
I mean, I guess. The only other thing I could say to counteract that, but is that, well, technically, we don't really know what the logo fully was back then. I don't know for sure, in all honesty. But
Let me ask an even more crucial question. Can we now prove that Michael Afton and Mike Schmidt are the same character? And what we've been given from this logbook plus the recent ephemera kit Ticket to Fun, the answer, once again, is an astounding yes. Here's why. First, we need to answer something pretty massive relating to the player of FNAF 1, which is why the hell are the animatronics actually trying to attack Mike Schmidt? Seriously, have you ever thought about this? We know that there are multiple different employees working at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, yet for some reason they are attacking this one random security guard at night. Why on earth is this?
That is actually weak reasoning. They literally attacked the phone guy, so...
Are they attacking anyone with a security badge? Well, no, since they actually know exactly what Afton looks like at this point in the timeline from Slane.
Okay, what the heck? I have no idea what happened there.
In FNAF 2,
Okay, I have no idea what happened there.
At night. Why on earth is this? Are they attacking anyone with a security badge? Well, no, since they actually know exactly what Afton looks like at this point in the timeline from Save Them and know their exact target. Now, one might think I'm being crazy with this conclusion, because people would point to Ralph and Jeremy as examples of the animatronics attacking just anyone they see with a security badge, but this actually isn't the case. Let me explain. In FNAF 2, we are actually given a definitive explanation as to why the animatronics are attacking you, Jeremy Fitzgerald, in the week you're working there, which is that the animatronics have had their criminal database tampered with.
Just as a side note, though, try to avoid eye contact with any of the animatronics side if you can. Someone may have tampered with their facial recognition systems, we're not sure. But the characters have been acting very unusual, almost aggressive toward the staff.
Were the Wizards given this technology? Yes, they absolutely were.
They even started retrofitting them with some of the newer technology.
This newer technology is directly tied to what Ralph said at the beginning of Night 1.
Facial recognition, advanced mobility, they even let them walk around during the day. Isn't that neat? But most importantly, they're all tied into some kind of criminal database so they can detect a predator a mile away.
This means that William would have need to mess with both the Wizards and the Classics facial recognition systems to simply attack anyone with a security badge to frame anyone that isn't him as the killer of the DCI. We also know from the second movie that this is exactly what the Wizards do. They scan you to see if you are a human or an animatronic, and if you're an animatronic, then you're safe. This is actually something that Ralph himself directly mentions in the game.
They interact with the kids just fine, but when they encounter an adult, they just stare.
Now then this gets into the other question. Why are they attacking Ralph in FNAF 1? Well, first thing to note is that they actually weren't prior to the week that Ralph actually dies. We actually get an implicit explanation as to why the animatronics are attacking Ralph on Night 4.
Hey, do me a favor. Maybe sometime you could check inside those suits in the back room. I'm gonna try to hold out until someone checks. Maybe it won't be so bad. I always wondered what was in all those empty heads back there.
Keep in mind that Ralph has been working the night shift at Freddy's literally for 5 years at this point.
When the place eventually opens again, I'll probably take the night shift myself.
The animatronics didn't get aggressive randomly. They got aggressive because Ralph was poking around backstage at their heads, and depending on your interpretation of the missing kid's identity relating to the suits, they have absolute justification to kill you for. So if the possibility of them attacking Ralph and Jeremy is not based on simply them having a security badge, this doesn't answer why they're attacking Mike Schmidt. So what is the answer? Because he looks like William Afton. By this point in the timeline, William has actually revealed what he looks like as the character.
Okay, if we're gonna do it like that, then essentially we could just say that William's Mike Schmidt. Like really.
Killer to the missing kids and save them, and even if he hadn't, I wouldn't be surprised if the puppet actually was able to show the other kids what William actually looked like. This appears to be the reason why William actually goes into the Spring Bonnie costume in the events of Follow Me, because seemingly William can only fool the spirits if he's wearing the Spring Bonnie costume due to this problem, something he doesn't need to do in the other two timelines. Now, how could Mike Schmidt possibly fit the identity of William Afton to the missing kids? Because he's Michael Afton.
They thought I was you. They thought I was you. They thought I was you.
The Immortal and the Restless is further proof of this. The whole point of the show is that the father disowns his child, who wears purple, despite the fact that the show could not be clear that the child is his because he looks and acts the exact same way. In the FNAF 6 Lefty alleyway, we see a poster that appears to resemble the Afton family, with Elizabeth as the clown, the bite victim as the bear, and William with a puppet that looks exactly like him, aka Michael. So mapping that onto Mike Schmidt, it makes perfect sense why they would confuse him for William, because he looks exactly like his father. Now let's put the logbook on hold for a little bit and head into the next section of this video, Ticket to Fun. Now I'm not going to talk too extensively about it, considering it is a pretty small book, but there are quite a few pieces of bite-sized information that I definitely want to mention that 100% supports the idea that Mike Schmidt and Michael Afton are the same character. In the package of this book, it comes with a small blue flashlight that can help you uncover secrets within the kit, as well as some trinkets which I'll get into in a minute. First, we are shown that the writer of the things in the blue light is Mike Schmidt, which means that whatever information we are given in this book is crucial to understanding Mike Schmidt's character, and boy howdy do we see some crucial stuff in this book. First, on the cover we can see that the security guard is a guy with a purple shirt and blue jeans. Does that ring a bell to anyone? Second, we're shown a drawing of Balloon Boy and the puppet. Weird, considering that Mike Schmidt, in name, is never shown working at the FNAF 2 location, and Balloon Boy and the puppet are not in the FNAF 1 location. Even if the puppet is in the FNAF 1 location hidden somewhere, it's not anywhere on the cameras, and Balloon Boy especially makes no sense unless they were selling certain Balloon Boy toys at the time. Now, while it's technically possible that this is the case, what is more important is that Mike is directly connected to being a FNAF 2 guard, as the trinkets that were provided with the kit include a security badge with Toy Freddy on it and Jeremy Fitzgerald's paycheck. So why on earth is Mike Schmidt being connected to FNAF 2? Well, presumably he'd be connected with one of the guards there, as if he's either Jeremy Fitzgerald, hence why he has the paycheck, or that he was Fritz Smith and collected Jeremy Fitzgerald's paycheck after getting bitten in the Bite of 87, something that Mike Schmidt knows about. Third, on the Armed and Dangerous page, we see Mike circling the words "save a life" and crossing it out, and then writing "not yours." Something interesting about this is that we know Michael Afton does this in the logbook, crossing out security and writing in survival. Again, this doesn't prove that they're the same, but it, once again, is evidence of repeated behavior and therefore worth pointing out. But the final and most important piece of information we get is related to something that absolutely blew up the internet when it was first revealed, and that has to do with Charlotte's death, which is that the person drawing this, aka Mike Schmidt, literally knows about Charlotte's death. This is absolutely massive, and I don't think people realize just how huge this actually is, that Mike Schmidt knows about Charlie's death. On top of the fact that this is Charlotte's game sprite from Security Puppet, which directly connects to Michael Afton, how would Mike Schmidt know about Charlotte's murder when it was never made public? The only deaths that William Afton ever caused that ever went public were the missing kids, and that was precisely because he was caught on camera. And they were tied to people who weren't related to the company. Charlotte, Elizabeth, and the Bite victims' deaths were never made public, because if they were, they would not only have had serious PR problems for the company, but considering Elizabeth and the Bite victims' death caused immediate shutdown of their respective locations, if Charlie's death was ever made known to the public, Freddy Fazbear's Pizza would have closed down in 1983. For God's sake, we literally see this happen in the films, that Charlotte's death being public got the place shut down immediately. So the fact that rando guard Mike Schmidt knows about this is absolutely absurd. Meanwhile, Michael Afton knowing about this makes perfect sense. At the very least, we can say that Michael knows about her death in FNAF 6 due to Henry telling him and by hearing him tell his daughter to rest, but it makes perfect sense that he would know beforehand due to being the child of William who has direct ties to Henry. Now going back to the logbook, before we get into the piece of evidence that definitively proves their identity as the same, and yes, I do mean that in its strongest form, just like with the exclusive game evidence, I'm going to continue to point out things from the logbook that definitely suggest that Michael is the Fazbear's Fright Guard, which ties into supporting him being the same guard as the first game. In the logbook, you see Foxy sitting on a sofa chair reading a magazine called Screws, Bolts, and Hairpins on page 4. This directly connects to what Hand Unit says at the beginning of Sister Location.
Whether you were approached at a job fair, read our ad in screws, bolts, and hairpins, or if this is the result of a dare, we welcome you.
Furthermore, later on page 70, you have the faded text saying to Altered text, "Do you miss him?" Considering that Altered is responding to the statement, "The party was for you," by saying, "It was for me," referring to the birthday party of Happiest Day clearly being within the bite victim's memory, the only logical conclusion is that the questions being asked throughout the logbook is to the bite victim. This, from what I have seen, is pretty much unanimous, regardless of whoever you think the faded text spirit is. Now, going through the entire logbook, the questions asked are always related to what is going on in the page. For example, does he still talk to you? Is this song familiar to you? Do any of these toys look familiar to you, etc.? So by Faded asking the bite victim, "Do you miss him?" in reference to the crying Foxy on the page, seems to heavily imply that Foxy is representative of Michael in the logbook. Anyway, knowing this, what do we see from night 2 to 5 on the logbook? A Foxy with a security badge in the FNAF 3 location. If there was anything in this book that screamed who the guard identity was, it's these pages. Now, going off of what I said earlier about Michael being the fright guard, here is what's quite fascinating. If Michael is the player of only 4 to 6 or even just 5 to 6, we have actually never seen Michael Afton as a security guard in Gameline, so inferring that he would be a guard in the 3rd game is pretty strange. In 4, he's having dreams. In Sister Location, he's a technician, and in Pizza Sim, he's a manager. So giving Michael the identity of guard is quite strange if it's not trying to tell you that he's had this job before. But now, we finally get into the piece of evidence that moves this from a logical inference to explicit proof. And yes, I'm willing to say it that strongly. In the logbook, we know for 100% certainty that Michael Afton has seen Nightmare Fredbear by the fact that he's drawn it. We also know that the Nightmare animatronics were never physical creatures, even if they did have official designs inside of the experiment chambers.
This time, there is more than an illusion to fear. I assure you, I am very real.
I am given flesh to be your tormentor.
Nightmare Fredbear being drawn specifically is especially interesting, considering it is explicitly excluded from the Tales story Didophobia, the story that gave us quite a bit of information on how the Nightmare animatronics work inside of the Sister Location experiment chambers. This means that whatever he is drawing is exclusive to FNAF 4 and has nothing to do with what is going on in the real world. While it's true that Nightmare Fredbear exists in FNAF VR, meaning he might have been a tangible official creation, we have no official evidence that Michael himself discovered this, especially at the time that the survival logbook came out. Regardless, this was pointing us to the conclusion that Michael himself was the player of the FNAF 4 nightmares within actual dreams. The exact method of how is questionable. There's a lot of attempts to explain this, like follow victim or that the remnant from the scooper gave him memories that weren't his, including the bite victims, but the logbook implication is as clear as it gets. Michael Afton is the dreamer, and the vast majority of the community has accepted as such. But regardless of whether the logbook proved that he was the dreamer, it didn't need to. All it needed to do was point us to this conclusion so that we could evaluate what was actually within the game itself, which was this: the fact that the FNAF 4 gameplay has the phone calls from FNAF 1 reversed and slowed down. Take a listen.
For you weird.
To help you get settled in on your first night. Hello. I wanted to record a message for you to help you get settled in on your first night.
Now, I'll get into why this is definitive proof that Michael is the player of FNAF 1 in a second, but what we first need to do is establish that this proves that Michael is the FNAF 4 player, thus proving that this is indeed what the logbook was getting at with the Nightmare Fredbear drawing. First, what we know is that this is not Michael's memory himself, it's actually the bite victim's memory. This is why we're actually playing as a small child, and explains things like how the character encyclopedia tells us that the bite victim is the one being terrorized by the nightmares. What we know, however, is that these are not real events and are most definitely dreams. This was definitely implied by the lines from the animatronics in Ultimate Custom Night as provided before, but Nights 6, 7, and 8 show us that the Nightmare core are actually replaced by Nightmare and Nightmare Fredbear mid-night, which is something explicitly supernatural. Now, the bite victim himself was never a guard at Freddy's, nor ever heard these phone calls, which means there are only two candidates, Michael Afton or Mike Schmidt, assuming that they are separate. But considering that we know that Michael Afton was the one drawing Nightmare Fredbear, therefore we can logically deduce that Michael Afton was, indeed, the player of FNAF 4. Now this is huge for two monumental reasons when it comes to what Scott was telling us at the time of this game coming out. The first was one of the clues given to the 2015 MatPat Theorist stream trying to figure out the lore, 4 games, 1 story. By him telling us this, he was intentionally trying to say that this was not only intended to be the last game in the series, but that he was deliberately trying to connect this game's evidence with the story of the first 3 games. And the marketing proves this, calling it the final chapter of the series. In putting something from the first game in the final game of the series to try and tell us what the story actually meant, something like this is deliberately placed so that one will conclude that these nightmares have to do with the player of the first game. Now, does this prove that Mike Schmidt was the player of games 2 and 3 as well? No, but what it was trying to do was tell us that the player of FNAF 4 was the player of FNAF 1. And now that we know that Foxy Bro is Michael Afton, we now know what Scott was trying to do with this piece of information. Tell us the origin story of the player. But the second reason is the thing that puts this into something highly plausible, into something that is a deliberate fact. Scott himself said that there were no random Easter eggs in the 4th game. Here is the official quote. But then I released part 4 and somehow no one, not a single person, found the pieces. The story remains completely hidden. I guess the community assumed I filled the game with random Easter eggs this time. I didn't. Now, admittedly, pragmatically, it is possible that Scott is not saying that there is no random Easter egg in the game, but what he is saying is that there is no random Easter egg related to the story. This is the standard for discernment as to whether an Easter egg is lore relevant or not. For example, the pictures of Scott and his family in the hallway is an Easter egg that is not affiliated with the story. But considering that the players of each game are related to the story and this Easter egg creates an implication as to what is the player, then it is impossible to throw it away as random. And are we really going to say that an Easter egg located in one of the most important parts of the game is the only one that is random? No, that would be absolutely and utterly absurd. So then, what exactly was Scott trying to imply with this Easter egg? That this completely new rando character Foxy Bro that we just met in this game is actually a guard that worked after Mike Schmidt in the first game? Absolutely not. And as the cherry on top to this sundae, if Michael worked at FNAF 1 and heard these phone calls after Mike Schmidt under the 2 Mike hypothesis, how did he hear them? Are we saying Fazbear Entertainment reused them as training tapes to all upcoming guards? Well, no, because Ralph literally dies in these calls. Sure, it's possible Mike found these logs backed up on the phone, but we do not have any evidence of this, and it requires us to beg the question, or assume the position that Mike and Michael are separate for it to work. And finally, last but not least, what reason does a random guy, Mike Schmidt, have to tamper with the animatronics and get fired for doing so? Considering we see Michael in the logbook show 2 examples of him actually messing with the animatronics, albeit symbolically, we have literally nothing to explain why a random guy would tamper with the animatronics and have multiple pieces of evidence as to why Michael Afton would. Because of all of these things, I am confident enough to say that Mike Schmidt being Michael Afton is a definitive fact.
Okay. I can say without a doubt he is like the character we play as in 4 to 6, but I don't know about FNAFs 1, 2, and 3. Even with all this information, there's just some things that just make me doubt that.
So then, if it is so clear-cut and decisive, then why exactly is this a controversial topic? There really is simply only one answer regarding that question, and that is the second Five Nights at Freddy's movie. The sole reason now why people argue that Mike Schmidt and Michael Afton are two separate people is based on what the second movie revealed within its timeline, which is that they are indeed two separate people with two completely separate backgrounds. Mike Schmidt is simply a regular guy who got himself involved at Freddy's, and Michael Afton is biologically related to William Afton as his son. Therefore, proven and case closed, right? Not even close. In fact, the movies could not be more obvious that they intentionally split this character in half and made each character contain a half of Michael's story from the games. First things first, as you may have noticed, I have explicitly been calling Michael Afton by his full name, Michael, this entire video to avoid confusion. However, we know that, in the games, there have been 2 times where he has absolutely gone simply by Mike, both by the Tap It On Hand Unit, where Hand Unit says,
Yeah, because Mike is a nickname for Michael. And Mike is, I think, a real name. So essentially, it's kind of a contradiction.
Please enter your name as seen above the keypad. This cannot be changed later, so please be careful.
The name above the keypad is Mike, which straight up tells us that we are playing as him. The second time is how he writes his name in the logbook as Mike, meaning this is indeed his nickname. We also know William calls him Mike due to what he screams in Ultimate Custom Night. Later in the monologue, he says, "Father, it's me, Michael." This shows us that he doesn't prefer one or the other and goes by both. But in the movies, this is deliberately changed and the movie makes it painfully obvious.
You must be Mike.
It's Michael, actually. Call me Michael.
If that is not obvious evidence of a change, then I don't know what is. The reason as to why they needed to make this distinction, something they didn't need to make in the games, is precisely because the distinction doesn't need to exist in the games. Unlike Gameline Michael, who definitively goes by both Mike and Michael, Film Mike Schmidt goes exclusively by Mike, and Film Michael Afton goes exclusively by Michael, precisely because this distinction was necessary. And the distinction is not necessary in Gameline because they're the same person. Furthermore, there are clear Easter eggs that are given to both of these characters from Michael in Gameline. The alarm clock goes off at the beginning of the movie for Mike, just like in the games. Mike does a morning workout just like Logbook Mike. There's the pills in FNAF 4 that most definitely could be the sleeping pills. And by far the most important one, Mike Schmidt literally has the sun clock above a lamp, something we know belongs to Michael Afton in the games. Why on earth would that, of all things, be given to him? Meanwhile, Michael Afton has the slick hairdo like his game counterpart, and in the second novel, when Camera Guy dies, he does a dance that, well, somewhat resembles this very famous Michael dancing meme that I played at the beginning of the video. But in my opinion, the clearest point to this is literally just to look at their stories. Mike Schmidt is a depressed middle-aged man trying to relive and figure out the sins of his past of a tragedy happening to his younger brother that he feels responsible for by dreaming. Man, I don't think we've ever seen that before in the games. Meanwhile, Michael Afton is the biological son of William Afton, who is actively doing what he says, despite the fact that he never got the attention that he wanted that was directed towards his younger sibling. That also is definitely not something we've ever seen before in the games. Apologies for my snarkiness, but in all seriousness, my point is that each version of Mike in the movie is intentionally taking two halves of the Michael Afton story and splitting it across two separate characters in order to tell a different story. This is a trope that isn't new to fiction, and it's even been done before in FNAF already. See my original video addressing this in the top right corner. So if this is what the movie was trying to get across, then why have so many people flocked back to the idea that Mike Schmidt and Michael Afton are two separate characters in game line as well? Well, it's as simple as this. Tom from Game Theory. Now look, not all...
Well, not really fully that, I guess. But kind of him, but also something else, really. It's the fact that there's confirmation that Scott literally says that the FNAF 2 movie has information in it that just makes you think, yeah, there is stuff in this film that is canon to the FNAF game universe. And that just
of Tom's
really
theories are
changes
bad.
everything.
I think many of his Secret of the Mimic theories weren't really all that bad. But when this video came out, I smacked my head so many times because I was really hoping that Tom would not have come to this conclusion from the films, precisely because something settled and put to bed didn't need resurrection from the dead. That rhymed. I didn't even realize that. But alas, here we are, what is, in my opinion, arguably one of the worst game theory videos ever made on Five Nights at Freddy's. Look, I love you, Tom, but you really, really missed the mark on this one. First, even looking at the video, the premise itself is completely founded on a pure assumption that sister location must happen before FNAF 2, because supposedly that's the beginning of his journey and how that creates a major timeline issue. Here is what Tom says.
For this theory, there were three major pieces of evidence. Firstly, even though he calls himself Michael at the end of Sister Location,
Father, it's me, Michael.
during the game we see the name Mike on hand units. He also used Mike in the security logbook, and when Afton perishes in Ultimate Custom Nights, he also called him by this nickname. The second piece is that in FNAF 1, we play as a character called Mike Schmidt, who was fired for tampering with the animatronics and his odor. Now, not only therefore is he using the same first name, but when you're a literal walking corpse, yeah, you're probably gonna smell a bit. Fred Smith was also fired for the same thing, leading us to believe that Michael was going location to location under fake names in order to fix everything, which ties into evidence point number 3, where at the end of Sister Location, Michael tells his father,
I'm going to come find you.
this was his main motivation. Michael was going after his father after learning the truth about what he did with the express purpose of revenge.
Now, these points are not even close to the foundation of the case for these two characters being the same, but as he later explains in the video, there is a major issue with this, which has always been the issue of Sister Location happening before FNAF 2. The fact that the missing kids are inside of the fun times. Now, this is a point of the theory I definitely agree with.
We're pretty sure that the fun times have souls in them. Even with this reevaluation of evidence, it still feels pretty likely. We saw that the original animatronics were melted down to create remnant in the fourth closet, which was then injected into the fun times to bring them to life. We also got lines from Candy Cadets about 5 things becoming one, the 5 children's souls smushed together into one thing, which once Michael is scooped, they escape using his body as Ennard, and then go on to become Molten Freddy, with the 5 souls being inside one body. We even saw these spirits arguing with Elizabeth in the source code of Scott's website, revealing to us that transformation from Ennard to Molten Freddy. And more recently, people discovered that the furnace during the Ennard repair level of Help Wanted contains a bunch of Endo 01s, the same Endos used for the classic animatronics. Z is being melted in Ennard's level. The character who is the culmination of these souls, it seems like they might be connected. So Afton breaking these animatronics apart, creating the fun times, and then getting spring-locked in a back room would all have had to happen before Michael goes down to Sister Location and gets scooped.
And while I agree with all of this so far, I am completely dumbfounded by his conclusion.
Which means Michael can't be the night guard in each location. Basically, even though we liked it,
Now, he doesn't even attempt to explain why this is an issue, but from what I can gather, the reason why he is saying this is because he connects this to the idea that the reason why Michael is the guard in FNAF 2 is solely founded on the idea that he gets fired for odor, something that would happen by being a rotting corpse. I cannot wrap my head around this conclusion because by no means is the idea of Mike and Michael being the same character founded on this. As you'll notice, I literally have not brought it up a single time in this entire video, precisely because I think it's terrible evidence. Not only does one being fired for odor not require Michael to be a corpse, but I literally don't even think he's a corpse even by FNAF 6. This is because Remnant wouldn't just keep Michael stagnant as a corpse forever, it would regenerate his body. In the fourth closet, Carlton gets completely stabbed by William Afton, and Michael Brooks ends up giving him a piece of paper with Remnant on it that heals him from this wound that absolutely should have killed him. In Sister Location, Michael doesn't just fall over and spit Ennard out, his body literally caves in on itself, implying he has no skeleton. and after a few seconds of Elizabeth stating to him that he wouldn't die, precisely because he has remnant in him, he ends up standing up, meaning that it is very likely that the remnant inside Michael has regenerated his body's skeleton, allowing him to stand up. But even if it was the case that he was a corpse by FNAF 6, I truly do not understand how Sister Location being after Follow Me in the timeline prevents Michael from working as the guard from FNAF 1 and 2, and Tom seems to present it as such. So what is Tom's solution for this non-existent problem? The 2 Mike hypothesis, something he openly admits is not narratively satisfying.
Does it make things more satisfying? Definitely not.
Not only does this contradict what he just said previously, which is that Mike can't be the guard at FNAF 1 because Sister Location happens later in the timeline, however on earth he got to that conclusion, there are 4 serious problems with Tom's 2 Mike model. Number 1, it is purely ad hoc and ignores the most crucial piece of lore data we have. For those who don't know, the term ad hoc is simply Latin for this, or for this reason only. There is literally no reason as to why Tom would come to the 2 Mike hypothesis, other than the fact that it challenges the 1 Mike hypothesis. And the explanation only exists to dodge what is written in the logbook, especially considering that Tom mentions a lot of what I have mentioned in this video up to this point, like the phone calls, the logbook, and even Ticket to Fun. So all of those explanations are, quote, done away with by his 2 Mike hypothesis that has literally no evidence surrounding it. Number 2, it completely dodges the 2 Mike's coincidence, violating Occam's razor. For those who don't know what Occam's razor is, otherwise known as inference to the best explanation, it's a principle where if there are 2 models that answer the same evidence, then you should always go with the simpler explanation, the reason being that it requires fewer assumptions. Sure, could we assume that Michael worked at FNAF 1 after Mike Schmidt and somehow had the exact same eye color and somehow found the phone calls and somehow that when Scott was providing crucial information at a time that was at the height of its debate, he actually still wanted the community to think that they were separate? Sure, we could do that. But this would severely violate Occam's razor, and I think should all of you, refuse to do that. Number 3, it solves absolutely nothing. As pointed out earlier, there is no timeline issue solved here because putting Sister Location later in the timeline is what the vast majority of the community does now anyways, and yet it never contradicted Michael working at Freddy's earlier. And finally, number 4, we do not have, and have never, had any evidence that there was any guard after Mike Schmidt at the FNAF 1 location. In fact, I find it highly unlikely. Considering Ralph took the night shift at the end of FNAF 2 and is ending his week before Mike, the paycheck for Mike Schmidt in FNAF 1 is given out on November 12, 1993, and based on the newspaper article says that Freddy's was shutting down that very year. This gives Michael a window of pretty much a month and a half to get this job, and considering that the firing of Mike Schmidt would mean that they probably would have to put out more help wanted flyers on newspapers, means a lot more budgeting that they have to work out before the place closes. And while it's true that they could have done that, that presents a major hurdle for them, and again, there is no evidence that they ever did that. And as for the lovely cherry on top, Tom says something that is fundamentally impossible based on the information we were given at the time of FNAF 4.
And all of this actually solves the issue I've been raising. With Michael being his own character, he now doesn't have to be present at all in FNAF 1 to 3. He can just be the protagonist of FNAF 4 to 6. FNAF 1 to 3 instead can be the story of Mike Schmidt. His name is on the FNAF 1 paycheck. FNAF 2 starts with Jeremy, but after getting bit at the end of
Considering that Scott himself said 4 games, 1 story, in order to accommodate for this, you literally would have to argue that Scott changed his mind about, you know, the entire story given in the first 4 games, and therefore discredit all of the evidence that he was giving us for the identity of Mike Schmidt, or pushing us to that conclusion. Is this something anyone should be willing to adopt? Until Scott says, yeah, that's basically what I'm doing, there is zero reason why we should make that assumption. Now, before I end this video, I want to go over something that is going to sound super boring, but I promise that it won't be, and in my opinion is the most important part of the entire video. For the final section of this video, I'm going to be going over something called epistemic philosophy. Yes, I know, philosophy in a FNAF theory. Oh, so terrible, but I promise I won't bore you guys with anything like super confusing. For those who don't know what epistemology is something known as the study of knowledge and how it relates to human belief. Now, earlier in this video, I was willing to call Mike Schmidt being Michael Afton a definitive fact, and I'm sure that there are multiple people out there where that statement might bite a little bit. But there is a genuine reason as to why I call it a fact, and I'm going to explain that right now. A common question in the philosophical study of knowledge is the question of how we actually obtain knowledge, and when something crosses over from theory to fact. I'm sure that this is super relevant to a lot of the FNAF community, considering that there is so much that's ambiguous when it's related to the topic of theories and how unbelievably ambiguous some of the topics in the series are. And while there is no real unified answer as to when something crosses over from theory into fact, there have been significant proposals in history. One of these is Plato's explanation in a dialogue between Socrates and his friend Meno all the way back in ancient Greece, who famously asked if knowledge is possible and whether it can be taught. Plato used a great analogy that the majority of philosophers use throughout history, that a fact is like an animal running away trying to escape, but if it's tied down by a shackled explanation, it's knowledge. Something can be true and you can believe it, but it doesn't become knowledge until it's truly justified in belief. Even though nowadays this standard isn't sufficient, the concept of being, quote, tied down by an explanation that is not refuted by any standard of reason is a view known as fallibilism, which is the idea that knowledge can be obtained even without proof of absolute certainty. As you guys have seen, there is nothing within this video that is truly 100% irrefutable. One can technically provide an explanation to explain away literally every single piece of information I have presented, but from what I have seen, there is no reasonable explanation of the FNAF 4 phone calls to the contrary that are actually a viable option, as opposed to simply believing that Mike Schmidt and Michael Afton are the same person. And when it comes down to it, 99.9% of people live like a fallibilist. Let's say you've been prescribed medicine by a doctor that if you don't take, you will die. But then you actually respond by saying, give me absolute definitive proof that if I take this medicine, I will not die or else I will not take it. Because a doctor will not be able to give you 100% definitive, undeniable proof because they cannot predict the future, then the patient would never end up taking the medicine. But because you can have such reasonable confidence that the medicine will not kill you, since this hypothetical medicine has killed literally nobody in the past, then you can say that it is a fact that it will not kill you, even without complete theoretical certainty. If complete theoretical certainty were required, pretty much nothing would ever be in the realm of fact. And that is exactly what I say with Mike Schmidt and Michael Afton being the same person. I am truly confident that the phone calls in FNAF 4 and the surrounding context around it is what crosses this from theory into fact, which is the reason why I say that it is a fact that Mike Schmidt and Michael Afton are the exact same person, and you should too.
Okay. Honestly, when it comes down to it, I don't know what to really think about the whole Michael Afton is Mike Schmidt. Do I wish I could just say that before? Yeah, I wish I could just go back to it like that and make it simple, but there's just a lot of stuff that contradicts that, and everything that points out is just like, it keeps bothering me. Like, the more I think about Michael Afton's history and the timeline itself, I'm thinking more of, yeah, that doesn't make sense. There's some things here that just prevent it from happening. Because essentially, here's what I mean. Let's put this towards this case. FNAF 1 and sister location. Like, for example, or more specifically, the night William Afton, well, the week of William Afton destroying all the animatronics. It doesn't make sense when you think about it. Because let me put it this way. 1 week or one whole night, William Afton is destroying every single animatronic. And people just say, oh, people just rebuilt it, the animatronics, the second they were destroyed. No. No, because literally, with evidence from the books to implement what happened, William Afton took away the endoskeletons and melted it down and applied them to the Funtime animatronics. To test Remnant. And then it got sprained. So, in all honesty, it would make no sense for them to essentially come back into the animatronics themselves and try to attack someone, because the metal's gone, the company is pretty much ruined, and so on and so forth. So if we have to go, because let me put it this way, because people are saying this one theory that if Michael Afton is Mike Schmidt, William Afton died, and it's very clear that William Afton died first, then Michael Afton went down to sister location. And then supposedly he went to FNAF 1 to work there. And that's the thing. How would FNAF 1's location be there if the endoskeletons are gone? And if they're gone, why would they react? How could they react? William Afton is trapped into the other room. The spirits are now mended with the metal in the endoskeletons. The endoskeletons are gone because William Afton took them to experiment on them. He shattered them and just left the remains of the suits. We saw what he did. He literally left the suits so he could go experiment with the metal. So it makes no sense because that obviously has to be the reason why he went to the first location to get the metal, experiment on it, and so on and so forth. And it obviously seems like FNAF 1 is an abandoned location. Not completely abandoned, but not overly active. So, if they have to make new endoskeletons and all this and all that, how would the spirits literally get into the suits? You're telling me that it was the costume part of the endoskeletons and not the actual metal? Yeah, no. Because it's obviously the metal of the skeletons themselves. Because otherwise, the pieces that were left in sister location would have been active and actually did something else. But they didn't. So, that leads to the question. What does that mean? Yeah, I'm asking that. So if it's obvious that that's the case, and we're saying that Michael Afton went after to and worked at FNAF 1 after sister location, it would make no sense for the animatronics to attack him. Even if they have the criminal record stuff, which if they do, then I guess that would kind of explain it, but it wouldn't explain. Oh my gosh, I'm messing up my words. It wouldn't explain why newspaper clippings and all that have been changing. It wouldn't explain why the animatronics are acting weird. they would more or less act like the toy animatronics and the Wither animatronics, not like what they did in FNAF 1. So that would make no sense. Plus, the company is already dead at that point, so it would make no sense to even try to reconstruct them. Could we say that it was before when William Afton did it? I mean, sure, but then we're going to have to talk about the timeline, and by that point, Michael would want William dead if he went to sister location first, because he would need to have a motive to actually go there, to work there. For what it said in sister location, it's obvious that Michael Afton essentially went down there because of freeing Elizabeth. And he was told by this from William, so it would make no sense. And you're telling me that in FNAF 1's location, he couldn't find William? Yeah, no. That would make no sense. And for FNAF 3, it's obviously you want, with the cutscene at the end, if you do 1020 in sister location, it's more of a thing that says, from my interpretation of it, as he said that William was already free. Now, here's the thing. We don't know exactly when Michael went to a circus baby. And for them to think he looks like William, he has to be a full-fledged adult. So we don't know what year he actually went to sister location. And we don't know how old he actually was when the bite happened, when it came to Dave Afton. So we got a contradiction there. And obviously, we are talking about Michael Afton essentially working at the NAF 2. And that leads to a question. Since it's 1987, and that's essentially 4 years after 1983, when the bite of Dave Afton happened. So basically 4 years passed. We don't know exactly what age Michael Afton was. Was he experiencing the nightmare animatronics coming after him? Yeah, I think so. That's obvious. Do I think he did go to sister location? Yeah. It's the only way that makes sense. Is it obvious that he's the guy that's in charge of FNAF 6? Yes. But ever since I had to really look into the timeline, there's just some stuff that just doesn't make sense. with more stuff being added to the timeline, with more stories being told, and with more clarification that Scott is saying, yeah, this subject has lore involving the timeline and stuff that haven't been previously thought of before. Because it's obvious that the toy animatronics weren't possessed. It was obvious that the withered animatronics weren't possessed. It was because of something else. The only thing we can say is probably possessed in there is the puppet and Golden Freddy. And that thing has been moved to FNAF 1, so yeah. And if we just say that Michael Afton just got a summer job at FNAF 2, okay. We can say that. But let's be honest. Those animatronics were acting weird. And in reference to that, you could just say that William Afton also took the job and was essentially the one that did the full week and had Michael come in for the last day. As a little bit of payback, maybe? I don't know. It's hard to really say on that account. But the person that went to day shift got bit by the mangle. So essentially, yeah, the first guy was someone. Like this ordinary person that just got involved. It's night 7 that's interesting. And it's obvious that whoever was the night guard in FNAF 1 was also the night guard in FNAF 2 on the last day. But I can't say it was Michael Afton because that's a contradiction. Because I think William would want to experiment more with the nightmare animatronics on Michael. So there's no way he would just simply stop. I'm honestly thinking, I honestly have this one theory that Mike Schmidt might be the one character that we haven't seen yet again. Because Michael had 3 other friends when it came to the fight. We know of the guy who wore the Freddy head, thanks to Into the Pit. We seen the guy who wore the Bonnie mask. So I'm honestly thinking that the Chica mask might have been the night guard, in all honesty. And then he learned what happened and decided to essentially not tell Michael and all that, because that would actually bring a connection to Michael, and Michael would have learned this and essentially want revenge for his friend for what William Afton did. Connection to Michael and all that. But again, I can't say for sure. I can't agree that Michael Afton was in FNAFs 1 and 2. My reasoning for FNAF 3 is admittedly a bit weak. Because honestly, I feel more like when at the end, at that one cutscene after 1020, it just doesn't make sense for Michael to be the Night Guard in FNAF 3. That's literally my issue. Maybe he was the Night Guard for FNAF 3, and he was Night Guards for 3. He was a main character in 3, 4, 5, and 6. But I can't really fully support 1 and 2 because that just seems like a bit of a contradiction to me. Tell me your thoughts in the comment section below. I'd like to hear your opinion on the matter. But yeah, with this all said, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye, everyone.